The training grounds of the Xyloxian War Academy echoed with the rhythmic clash of sparring weapons and the muffled thud of impacts against alien combatants' armor. Soldiers of all shapes and sizes moved with practiced precision, their drills reflecting the centuries-old traditions of countless species in the Galactic Consortium. Yet today the focus of the Academy was not on the sparring circles or the hollow simulations. Today it was on him, Captain Aaron Zorax, the Consortium's most decorated war veteran. Whispers of his exploits, particularly his survival on a Deathworld, had rippled through the ranks for years, turning him into both a legend and an enigma. The stories told of him narrowly evading apex predators, enduring storms that shredded armor, and navigating terrain designed to kill anything that dared tread upon it. Seated at the center of an amphitheater carved into the surface of Xylonia Prime, Captain Aaron Zorax, a retired war veteran of the Yelner species, watched the crowd assemble. Zorax, his scales dulled by time but his piercing amber eyes still sharp, commanded the attention of hundreds of soldiers and cadets. Among them, whispers rippled like an electric current. "They say he's fought on a Deathworld," one recruit murmured, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Impossible," another replied, her antennae twitching in doubt. "No one survives those planets. The gravity alone would crush you, let alone the predators." "Silence," barked an officer, her voice cutting through the chatter like a blade. "You're about to learn why Captain Zorax is the most decorated soldier in the Consortium. Show some respect." The recruits fell silent, their gazes locked on the grizzled veteran. Zorax rose slowly, the weight of his years evident in the deliberate way he moved. Yet, when he spoke, his voice carried the strength of 1,000 battles. "You call yourselves soldiers," he began, his tone as sharp as the blade strapped to his hip. "You train in controlled environments, surrounded by walls and rules. But war does not obey rules. It thrives on chaos, on fear, on pain. And no place in the galaxy understands that better than Earth. It's a place where survival demands more than strength. It demands ingenuity and resilience, lessons I learned the hard way." The amphitheater fell deathly quiet. The mere mention of Earth, a Deathworld infamous even in the Consortium, sent a ripple of unease through the crowd. Zorax's eyes scanned the room, taking in their reactions. He smirked. "I see you've heard the stories," he said. "But let me tell you what it's really like." The first time Zorax stepped onto Earth's surface, it was under orders. The Consortium had deployed him and his unit to observe the planet, not to engage. Earth was an anomaly, a Deathworld classified at level 5, the highest tier. Its crushing gravity, unseen microbial threats, and predators lurking in every shadow formed a relentless triad of danger unmatched in the galaxy. "We thought we were prepared," Zorax said, his voice heavy with memory. "Our armor was reinforced, our weapons calibrated. We'd faced the arachnid hordes of Silos, swarms of ravenous predators that could strip an entire battalion in minutes, and the thermal storms of Karen 9, where the heat could melt a soldier's armor in seconds. What could a single backwater planet possibly do to us?" He paused, his amber eyes narrowing. "Everything." The recruits leaned forward, captivated. Even the officers, seasoned veterans themselves, listened with rapt attention. "The moment we landed, Earth made its intentions clear," Zorax continued. "We descended into a region humans call the Amazon. Lush, vibrant, and alive in ways no simulation could replicate. But beneath the beauty lurked danger. Zorax's squad was ambushed within hours, not by humans but by the planet itself. Swarms of insects, their bites breaching advanced armor, drove several soldiers into fevered delirium. A serpent, nearly as long as a Consortium transport, crushed a recon drone like it was nothing. Then there were the predators, stealthy, relentless, and uncannily intelligent. "The humans call them jaguars," Zorax said, his voice a mix of awe and respect. "They move like shadows, their golden eyes gleaming in the darkness as they strike with surgical precision before vanishing without a trace. One of them stalked us for 2 days, leaving behind only the echoes of its presence and the chilling certainty that we were prey. We tried to anticipate its movements, setting traps and keeping constant watch, but each effort only seemed to amuse it, as if it knew we were helpless against its predatory patience." By now the crowd was utterly engrossed. Zorax's tale had pulled them from their comfortable routines and plunged them into the depths of Earth's unforgiving wilderness. Yet the veteran was only getting started. "You might think the planet itself was our greatest enemy," Zorax said. "But then we encountered them." The recruits exchanged uneasy glances. They knew who he meant. "Humans," Zorax said, the word hanging in the air like a challenge. "At first we thought them primitive, fragile. Their bodies are soft, their technology crude by consortium standards. But what they lack in physical strength they make up for with something far more dangerous. An uncanny ability to transform even the most innocuous object into a weapon. I remember seeing one use a simple vine to create a snare that brought down one of my best scouts. Silent, efficient, and lethal. He paused, letting the tension build. Adaptability? The first human they encountered was a scout. He moved through the jungle with an ease that unnerved Zorax and his team. His gear was minimal, a rifle, some supplies, and clothing that blended seamlessly with the environment. Yet, when Zorax's squad attempted to capture him, he evaded them effortlessly, using the terrain itself as a weapon. He led us straight into a trap, Zorax admitted, his tone tinged with reluctant admiration. Tripwires, pits, and fire, all fashioned from the jungle's natural elements, their simplicity disguising their deadly effectiveness. We barely escaped with our lives, the terrain itself seemingly conspiring with the humans to ensure our demise. The recruits murmured in disbelief, but Zorax silenced them with a raised hand. That scout was just one human, he said. Imagine what happens when they work together. The veteran's tale wasn't just a recounting of battles. It was a lesson in humility and respect for the unknown. As the amphitheater hung on his every word, Zorax leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Earth taught me something no battlefield ever could, he said. True survival isn't about brute strength. It's about mastering the interplay between your enemy, your environment, and yourself. Humans, they've turned this mastery into an art form. And if you ever face them in combat, remember this. His gaze hardened, sweeping across the sea of faces. Underestimate them and Earth won't just defeat you. It will bury you. I've seen it firsthand, squadmates lost not just to humans but to the very ground we walked on. I'll never forget Raxer, my best strategist, who vanished into quicksand while trying to flank a human position. One moment he was issuing orders, the next he was gone. Earth doesn't give second chances. Every shadow, every whisper of movement became a threat. Earth teaches you one brutal truth: survival is a privilege, not a guarantee. The amphitheater buzzed with the hushed murmurs of the audience, captivated yet uneasy. Zorax's vivid descriptions of Earth and its inhabitants had stirred a mix of awe and trepidation among the cadets and officers alike. Yet the veteran was far from finished. You think the human's ingenuity is impressive? Zorax said, his amber eyes gleaming. Wait until you see how they fight together. The mission had changed. What was supposed to be a covert observation of Earth's ecosystems became a desperate struggle for survival when Zorax's squad stumbled upon a human settlement. It was small, primitive by consortium standards, but brimming with activity. The humans worked with a synchronized efficiency that caught the aliens off guard. Their actions were purposeful, their community a seamless blend of discipline and adaptability. We underestimated them again, Zorax admitted, his tone grim. We thought their technology crude, their lives fragile. We assumed our training and advanced weapons would give us an edge. We were wrong. His squad had attempted to retreat, but the humans were already aware of their presence. Zorax's voice tightened as he recounted the first attack. It came without warning, he said. They used their terrain as a weapon, sniper fire from treetops, traps hidden beneath the foliage. They weren't fighting to win. They were fighting to make us bleed. The cadets leaned forward, their eyes wide. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. Zorax's words carried the weight of hard-earned wisdom, a stark reminder that strength alone was not enough to guarantee survival. The first night in the jungle was the longest of Zorax's career. The humans moved like phantoms, their attacks swift and precise. A shadow would flicker in the corner of his vision, followed by the sharp crack of a rifle. By the time his squad turned to return fire, the humans were gone, leaving nothing but the eerie silence of the jungle in their wake. We were outmatched in every way that mattered, Zorax admitted. The jungle was their ally. They knew its every sound, every shadow. It wasn't just a battlefield to them, it was home. His squad's advanced technology became a liability. Their drones, calibrated for open conflict, struggled to navigate the dense foliage. Their armor, designed to withstand plasma and ballistic rounds, was vulnerable to the humans' improvised explosives. Zorax's voice grew quieter, tinged with a rare vulnerability. I lost 3 soldiers that night, he said. Not to overwhelming firepower, but to an enemy that outthought and outmaneuvered us at every turn. The amphitheater fell silent, the gravity of his words pressing down on the audience. Zorax let the moment linger before continuing. By the second day, Zorax knew his squad couldn't survive by relying on their technology alone. They needed to adapt, to fight like the humans. He recalled the moment vividly, a hasty meeting among the survivors, crouched beneath the canopy as the distant sound of gunfire echoed through the trees. "If we keep playing by their rules, we're dead," Zorax had said, his voice steady despite the tension. "We need to think like them. Move like them. Use the jungle as a weapon." The shift was immediate and transformative. Zorax's squad began dismantling their drones for parts, creating improvised traps and decoys. They moved silently, ditching their heavier equipment to blend with the terrain. For the first time, they began to anticipate the humans' movements. "We turned the jungle against them," Zorax said, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. But it wasn't enough. The humans responded with a ferocity that stunned even Zorax. They escalated their tactics, coordinating ambushes that forced his squad into tighter and more desperate positions. One encounter stood out in Zorax's memory, a moment that would forever redefine his understanding of combat. "We thought we had them pinned," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of hindsight. "We set a trap, a clearing rigged with explosives. But the humans, they didn't just avoid it. They used it against us." The humans had somehow deduced the trap's location and lured Zorax's squad into it instead. A single incendiary round ignited the explosives, forcing the aliens to scatter. Zorax barely escaped with his life, the heat of the blast searing his armor. "It wasn't luck," he said. "It was strategy. They saw through our plans and turned them to their advantage. That was the moment I realized we weren't just fighting soldiers. We were fighting survivors." As Zorax's tale unfolded, the audience hung on every word. His voice carried the weight of experience, the vivid imagery of his memories drawing them into the dense jungles of Earth. Yet it was his conclusion that struck the deepest chord. "Humans are not the strongest species," Zorax said. "They're not the fastest or the most advanced. But they are relentless. Their ability to endure, to adapt, to think beyond the immediate fight, it's what makes them the most dangerous enemy I've ever faced." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the amphitheater. "Never underestimate an enemy who knows what it means to struggle, to lose, to claw their way back from the brink. That is what Earth taught me. And that is why you must never, under any circumstances, take humanity lightly." The silence in the amphitheater was absolute as Zorax's words lingered in the air. Even the officers, veterans of countless campaigns, seemed rattled by his tales. But Zorax had only scratched the surface. He straightened his posture, his amber eyes gleaming with a mix of pride and lingering unease. "Let me tell you what happened when we faced humans as a unit," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "Their tactics weren't just unconventional, they were impossible to predict. It was as though they could read our every move before we made it. That was when we truly understood what it meant to fight a Deathworld species." After days of relentless skirmishes, Zorax's squad managed to regroup on the edge of a clearing. They were battered, morale hanging by a thread. The jungle, which had felt like a living enemy, grew quieter as dusk approached. But Zorax knew better than to trust the silence. "The humans had stopped their direct attacks," he explained. "At first we thought they were retreating. But in reality they were planning something far worse. The attack came just before nightfall. Human soldiers emerged from the shadows like wraiths, their movements silent and coordinated. They didn't charge head-on. Instead, they struck from multiple angles, using the terrain to confuse and disorient Zorax's team. We were surrounded before we even realized what was happening, Zorax said. They used every advantage they had, the dense foliage, the setting sun, even the insects that had been tormenting us for days. Those swarms seemed to move with purpose, as though directed by an unseen hand. They drove us into vulnerable positions, forcing us to abandon cover and exposing us to the humans' relentless attacks. It was like the jungle itself was conspiring against us. Zorax's squad fought back with everything they had. Plasma bolts lit up the darkening sky, cutting through the trees and sending splinters flying. But for every human they managed to wound or kill, another seemed to appear, their strategy precise and unyielding. One moment from that battle stood out in Zorax's memory, a moment that had haunted him ever since. His team had managed to push forward, creating a small opening in the encirclement. Zorax led the charge, his blade cutting through the thick vines as he directed his team toward higher ground. Then I saw him, Zorax said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. A human soldier no older than some of you cadets standing alone in our path. His stance was steady, his movements deliberate, exuding a quiet confidence that unnerved me. He wasn't armed with anything advanced, just a bow of all things. But there was something in his posture, a calm assurance that froze the laughter in my throat. The laughter had died in Zorax's throat when the soldier knocked an arrow and fired. The projectile struck one of Zorax's men square in the throat, bypassing the weak points in their armor with precision that shouldn't have been possible. That wasn't luck, Zorax said, shaking his head. That was skill. He wasn't trying to intimidate us. He was trying to stop us. And he did. The cadets in the audience exchanged uneasy glances. Zorax let them absorb his words before continuing. We lost the high ground that day. The humans forced us back into the jungle, where their traps and ambushes picked us apart. By the time we reached our extraction point, only 4 of us remained out of a squad of 20. The silence among the survivors was deafening, each of us haunted by the faces of those we'd lost. Raxor's desperate shouts, cut short by the snap of an unseen trap, echoed in my mind. It wasn't just the physical toll, it was the crushing weight of knowing we had been outmatched at every turn by an enemy who refused to relent. The aftermath of the battle was etched into Zorax's memory. As he waited for the extraction shuttle, nursing wounds that cut deeper than his armor, he reflected on what had gone wrong. The humans hadn't just outmaneuvered them. They had outthought them. Humans fight with their minds as much as their bodies, Zorax said. They don't rely on brute force or overwhelming numbers. They rely on creativity, on unpredictability. And that's what makes them so dangerous. The extraction shuttle finally arrived, its engines roaring as it descended into the clearing. Zorax and the few survivors stumbled aboard, their spirits as battered as their bodies. As the shuttle ascended, Zorax looked down at the jungle one last time, its dark canopy hiding the human forces that had bested them. I realized then, Zorax said, that Earth wasn't just a death world because of its dangers. It was a death world because of its people. The silence in the amphitheater was broken only by the faint hum of the overhead lights. Zorax's audience was transfixed, their expressions a mixture of awe and apprehension. But the veteran wasn't finished. You might think this is a tale of defeat, he said. It's not. It's a lesson. One that you must carry with you if you ever hope to face an enemy like humanity. He stepped closer to the edge of the stage, his gaze sweeping over the cadets and officers. Earth taught me humility, Zorax said. It taught me that no matter how advanced we think we are, there's always someone out there who can challenge us. Humans thrive in adversity, as they showed us when they turned the jungle into their weapon. I remember a moment when they used nothing but vines and shadows to dismantle an ambush we had painstakingly set. They excel in chaos, mastering every element of their hostile world to gain the upper hand. And they fight not just to win but to survive. That's what makes them the most formidable adversaries in the galaxy. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. So, if you ever face humanity on the battlefield, remember this: they are not like us. They are something else entirely. And they will stop at nothing to protect what is theirs. With that, Zorax turned and walked off the stage, leaving the audience in stunned silence. The lesson he had imparted was clear. To underestimate a Deathworld species like humanity was not just a mistake, it was a death sentence. As Zorax stepped off the stage, the amphitheater remained eerily silent. The audience, cadets, seasoned officers, and visiting dignitaries, sat frozen, their minds reeling from the veteran's harrowing account. Whispers finally began to ripple through the crowd as they processed his words. For many, it was the first time they had truly grasped the gravity of the tales surrounding humanity and their infamous Deathworld. Backstage, Zorax leaned against a console, his usually stoic demeanor slipping as he let out a long, weary breath. Sharing his experiences always took its toll, but he knew it was necessary. It wasn't just about teaching, it was about preparing them for what could come. A compelling performance, Captain, came a voice from the shadows. Zorax turned to see Admiral Kreven, a towering figure with emerald scales that glinted faintly under the soft lights. The Admiral's expression was inscrutable, but his tone carried both respect and caution. Not a performance, Admiral, Zorax replied, his voice heavy. It's a warning. Humanity doesn't need grand fleets or vast armadas to be dangerous. Their strength lies in their unpredictability, their tenacity. Underestimating them could destroy us before we even realize we're at war. Kreven stepped closer, his tail flicking behind him in thought. Do you truly believe the Consortium is at risk of war with humanity? Their isolationism has been steadfast for decades. Zorax met the Admiral's gaze. Isolation doesn't mean weakness. And war doesn't require an invitation. Meanwhile, in the barracks, the cadets couldn't stop discussing what they had just heard. Do you think he was exaggerating? One asked, his voice wavering. Exaggerating, another snapped. He lost 16 soldiers. You can't fake that kind of pain. It's not just the pain, a third chimed in, her antennae twitching. It's the respect. Did you see how he spoke about them? Humans. Like they weren't even mortal. The room fell into a pensive silence before one of the senior recruits spoke up. I'll tell you this much. If we ever face them, we'd better hope we're as good as they think we are. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, though a few cadets exchanged uneasy glances. One recruit shifted uncomfortably, his mandibles clicking softly as he muttered, I just hope we never have to find out. Later that evening, Zorax sat alone in his quarters, staring at a worn data pad on the desk before him. The device contained his field logs, each entry a grim recollection of his time on Earth. He hesitated before activating it, the screen flickering to life to display a recording he hadn't watched in years. The image was shaky, captured by his helmet's visor during one of the most harrowing moments of the mission. The jungle loomed around the squad, its oppressive greenery seeming to swallow the faint light filtering through the canopy. Zorax watched as his younger self issued orders, his voice steady despite the chaos. The recording shifted, showing the ambush that had claimed Raxor. The sharp snap of the trap echoed through the speakers, a visceral crack that made Zorax flinch as if hearing it for the first time. The panicked shouts of his squad followed, layered with the rustling chaos of the jungle and the distant haunting call of an unseen predator. Each sound pressed down on him, the weight of failure and loss tangible in the air. Zorax paused the video, his hand trembling slightly as he rubbed his temples. We should have been better prepared, he muttered. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Enter, he called, his voice regaining its usual steadiness. The door slid open to reveal Lieutenant Vega, one of the Academy's rising stars. She saluted sharply before stepping inside. Sir, I wanted to thank you for your lecture today, Vega began. It opened a lot of eyes. Zorax studied her for a moment before nodding. Good. But understanding isn't enough, Lieutenant. Tell me, what did you learn? Vega hesitated, choosing her words carefully. That humans don't fight wars the way we do. That survival for them isn't just a tactic, it's their way of life. Remember the story he told about how they turned the jungle into an ally, using vines and shadows to dismantle an ambush? They've turned every weakness into a strength, and every challenge into an opportunity. A faint smile tugged at the corner of Zorax's mouth. You've learned well. Remember that. If the day ever comes when the consortium faces humanity, that knowledge may be the difference between victory and annihilation. Vega nodded, her expression solemn. She saluted once more before exiting, leaving Zorax alone with his thoughts. In the weeks that followed, Zorax's lecture became the talk of the Academy. Training drills began to incorporate unconventional scenarios inspired by his tales. Cadets were taught to think like their enemies, to see the battlefield not as an obstacle but as an opportunity. And yet, Zorax couldn't shake the feeling that his warnings might one day prove prophetic. Humanity remained an enigma, distant, silent, but ever present in the consortium's collective consciousness. Rumors of their advancements, whispers of their hidden strength, and the unresolved tensions of old skirmishes lingered like embers waiting to ignite. Zorax knew that all it would take was a spark, and the galaxy might witness a conflict unlike any it had ever seen. As he gazed out of his quarters at the stars beyond, he wondered not if, but when, their paths would cross again. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. If it comes to that, he whispered to himself, I only hope we've learned enough,